chemistry, and philosophy. It is everywhere, and it's been throughout history. And so we have a lot of those tendencies in us. We just kind of got it kicked out of us or forgot about it or something like that. So part of it is to awaken that. And then the teachers and principals, I do the same thing. One, because a lot of teachers, especially at the elementary age, are a little nervous about their own STEM abilities. And so I kind of encourage that. But then really see how they can help triage the children as they go through and sort of seeing who may not have had the fortune of having some good background and how they in the classroom can make up for that. So that as educators, we're sort of the equalizers, helping everyone get to an equal performance level and potential. Again, this is start STEM early, some parent tips, but again, some teacher tips in there. Let me know as it kind of comes through with you where it's going. My name is Yvonne and used to teach with St. Catherine University when they set up their, actually was the director at one point, of their National Institute for STEM Elementary Education, and then went into schools and taught current teachers about STEM, certified them, and then got pregnant and then left St. Kate's because I'm not very good at saying no to people, and so I figured, oh, children take a lot of time, so I need to be able to say yes to him more, and so then I left St. Kate's and went on my own, and I do this basically for fun. I have a lot of resources on my website. I'll send you a handout. It's engineeringplayground.com. So I put resources, Pinterest boards, Facebook pages, Twitter. I learn a lot about social media right now. But it's just basically that you can go there and find new tips, new resources. I have a blog that has a lot of content, some lesson seeds and so forth. And I'm always looking for people who want to share information, ask questions, and then just kind of make it real relevant to you. I work for my husband's engineering firm. Besides, I stay currently helping out in family business. So I do this mainly for fun. So that's what I'm at. So let's just talk about why people are interested in STEM. You've heard the term STEM. Obviously, you've been here for a while. What have you heard about it? And what is it that's always sort of been a question, or why are you interested? Yes.
I recently went to a lecture by Neil deGrasse Tyson, and he just emphasized the importance of STEM, so that kind of inspired to learn more about it for me personally.
Okay, great. He is a great representative of STEM, too. They say he's like a cool, hip Carl Sagan. Who was cool and hip in his own way, but a little comfier. Anyone else would like to share your perspectives?
We actually don't know what that stands for. We saw the tips for 0 to 5-year-olds, so I don't know about STEM.
That's okay. That's all right. STEM, I can just give you a sense of what it stands for: science, technology, engineering, mathematics. We'll go into that a bit more. But that's a good one.
And one of the things for my son is he's very into how things work right now. He's 4, and I know that the district provides a STEM-focused elementary school, and I'm trying to figure out and learn more about it as a whole, and trying to figure out maybe where's the best place for him as he's getting closer to elementary school.
That's Cedar Park Elementary School. I taught. They were actually one of the first set of teachers I taught. In engineering. They did really good science, really good math. They were trying to get more into engineering, sort of how things work. Because you don't, unless you actually went into engineering, people don't usually know what engineering is. And that actually my background was as aerospace mechanical engineering. And I actually worked with the control system, so I did a lot of computer and automation, so that's why I taught computers as well as engineering. Anyone else? I know people have heard, like, Obama's talked a lot when he started his inaugural address in 2008. He's saying, like, this is going to be the future, this is how we're going to go forward. So I'm going to give you a little background about just what STEM is, and more parent and teacher oriented. The interest in STEM has to do with currently, right now, making people, graduating students, employable. It deals with the future of the country, because usually they're interested in the American economy. And then for you, giving your child that earning potential in there. So I'll just briefly give you some information. This is all based off of some research, which I won't bore you with, but it is out there, and I do have those resources on my, I have a new website. I'm going to be merging my blog and my website together, so if you go to my blog for the teachers, there's a 4 teachers and 4 principals, and I have a list of research of reviews of interest. Maybe like write grants and things like that. So currently, more jobs need the STEM area, the science, technology, engineering, mathematics. Normally, when some people talk about STEM, they talk about scientists, engineers, and mathematicians or computer scientists, people who need college degrees and higher. And they're important, and that'll be in the next slide, but one of the things that the Brookings Institute said is we're not really looking at what students need just to be employable. And what they did is they said, let's look at any job that requires science, math, computers, other technologies, things like aviation technology, automation technology, these are all technologies, and engineering. And let's sort of see how many jobs those are, because those what they call super STEM, where you have a college or higher degree, is really only 4% of the jobs in the country. You can't really say we have a crisis, but those are only 4% of the jobs. But yet people knew there's something wrong, there's something missing. So Brookings took a look and they said, there are actually 26 million jobs, and this was 2013, so their study was slightly before it, that required STEM knowledge to some degree in the United States. That's 20% of all US jobs, which is slightly bigger. And then they said, if you look at the start of the Industrial Revolution, which was in the 1850s if you were in your history class, to today, that's doubled. The number of jobs that require some STEM knowledge has doubled. So we're anticipating the more designed world that we're in, the more complex diseases and health and so forth become, you're going to have more knowledge about that. And this is just the job itself requires it. Think about politicians, where it would be helpful if they actually knew scientific knowledge or knowledge about mathematics, could read statistics, and so forth to make good decisions. And then, of course, citizens being able to vote appropriately. So then the STEM is not a job related, but you start to see there's value to it. And that's one of the big things that they were saying we really need to think about, not just in terms of employability as a scientist or as an engineer. So now we look at the future. And of course, if we look in the past, we said that, since the Industrial Revolution, we've needed more STEM skills. If we look to the future, I just took a clip. These are some Fortune 500 companies that are based in the United States. If your eyes are as bad as mine, you can't see them, so I'll tell you what these companies are. This is Johnson & Johnson. You've heard of Johnson & Johnson? They run AIDS. They actually do also hip implants, joint implants. They do a lot with medicines and first aid care and health and so forth. Their number one thing that they're talking about on their webpage is the work they're doing with Ebola. So you think about that as a worldwide thing. One of the biggest things the U.S. is interested in is STEM development, because this is what we export to the world. We have the benefit of a very highly educated society, highly technological one, that provides solutions for the world. And that requires some of this STEM knowledge. So that's one of the things that they're looking at. We look down here, AT&T. Those of us who remember old phones, we know AT&T very well. AT&T is still around. They're not into the phone technology as much, although they do maintain our current cabled phone technology. If you have that still, I still do, but some people don't. And then they've also gone into, of course, your cell phone, but then internet. They're very big with internet. I think they're one of the big 3 companies that have a lot of internet wiring for that. So they deal with making sure it's secure. They said, actually, my friend is in internet, and she used to work for AT&T, and she said, every so often she says, oh yeah, we were sort of dealing with something, we were being attacked by China. Chinese, I'm like, yeah, China, okay. And so, but she said, yeah, they're just bombarding it and trying to kind of get into kind of doing this. So that's what they're doing. They're watching the internet, they're looking for weird traffic, they're trying to figure out how to make sure that everything is still safe and so forth. So a lot of math, a lot of technology involved there. She's an engineer, there's a lot of engineering, computer science. Up here is P&G, Procter & Gamble. They're from Ohio area in Cincinnati. You know Procter & Gamble extremely well, but you probably know them from Pampers diapers, Dawn soap. I think they do Tide. They have a lot of products, exactly. A lot of engineering, a lot of science, a lot of technology, a lot of those things. You can see they sell to the world. And that's sort of another part of their economy. GE, another US-based company, General Electric, doing actually much better than General Motors. They're into energy. They started off with lights, light bulbs, electricity, but they moved into things like they do rockets and so they're a broad range, and things that they're interested in are still keeping the idea of machines in mind. They still develop machinery. They're really big into the new lighting technology, LED lights. Back when fluorescent lights were coming, compact fluorescents that were coming out, they were really big into that too. So they keep looking forward and seeing what's the next thing that we need to supply for our country and the world. So you can see, as you think about those products, to develop new ones and then to bring them to market, you need science knowledge, math knowledge, technology knowledge. Okay. And one day I'm going to get an actual wireless one so I don't have to walk over to my computer to do it. This is kids adaptive. Now for your children. This is one of the biggest things that parents are most interested in, is what we call the STEM wage boom. And the U.S. Commerce did a recent study. It was actually about women. So I'm going to talk a little bit on that. You may have heard that men tend to earn more than women. It tends to be sometimes the jobs. Men can do construction, which will then pay higher than women do daycare kind of thing. It's just the kind of nature of the work. But when they do apples to apples, there is still an indication that men will tend to earn more than women. What this U.S. Commerce Department found is that if the woman has a STEM background, like a degree, even if she's working in a field that's not STEM, she gets a premium boost to her wages. She just brings more to the job and gets paid more with that. If you're able to work in a STEM field without a STEM education, and there are some computer areas allow some flexibility in that way, they still find that they have this premium. And so on average, you will earn more with a STEM job background, or both, definitely both, on average than if you don't have it. And I did the calculations real quick because I'm like, some of you are per hour people who know what this means, and I'm a salary person, so I'm like, what the heck does this come out to? So it comes out to about $74,000 for men with a STEM background versus $50,000, and then $63,000 for women with a STEM background, $39,000. And so that's about a $24,000 year difference, which averages to about $22,000 a month. So you bring home $2,000 more a month, basically, with a STEM background. So this is actually one of the reasons that a lot of parents sort of are interested in, if their child has it, and I always say, you're not forcing it. If your child has it, encourage it. Make sure that they bring it to the fullest potential. Some of you may be reading books. That wasn't French, right? Some of you may have read some books. My sister, Celeste Amy, actually wrote a book called Everything I Never Told You, which oddly enough is about a girl whose mother kind of got her to do science, and she hated science, and then there's this serious suicide. And it's a very dramatic, sad book. Don't read it now, it's winter. It's a sad book. It's definitely a summer reading kind of thing. But anyway, I was like, we come from a family of scientists and engineers, except my sister who's a writer. But anyway, we definitely don't talk about pushing. We talk about just simply enhancing as much, because it can create weird things too. So I know that you're not those kind of parents. You just want to make sure your child has the highest potential in the world. Back to this Brookings one, I just want to mention for a moment. Of those jobs, that 20% share of the jobs they are talking about, 50% of those don't require a college degree. And that's sometimes what gets wrapped up in the STEM discussion. And so a lot of people think of, because some kids, they're doers. They're not thinkers. I mean, not they think, but they're not school kids per se. So college may not be quite right for them, especially coming out of high school. Maybe later, or whatever. But that's one of the things I really find is very interesting, is that a lot of these don't require college degree. They may require like maybe a 2-year certification type of degree. They're dealing mainly with maintenance, repair, and construction of our current technologies. And they also include health professionals. So that's not just your nurses and doctors, but it's also those techs that help you with the eyes and the respiratory, your EKG, all of the sonography people, 2-year degrees. I actually taught some of it to some kids. So these are, and they require a good amount of science and a good amount of math. I mean, it's very serious, and we want them to know that in there. So that's something that they were saying, it may tend to be neglected, that a lot of these are blue-collar, working-collar jobs. So that means that it is a lot of children that can benefit from this background. Now, a lot of people, when they think about STEM, do you have any thoughts when someone says science, technology, engineering, mathematics, what do you think of? What are some words or images that come to mind?
Industry, industrial.
Industry, industrial, good. Anything else? Personally, from your own experience. Right. Some of my students say fear, anxiety, math especially gives that to them.
Curiosity.
Curiosity, okay. Things I'm not that good at, let's own it. Let's just say it out there. It's easier to address then, right?
Nature.
Nature, yep.
Cubicle.
People.
Cubicle.
Cubicle. My husband would probably say that. That's where he went on his own. When I worked at Honeywell for a period, I was in a cubicle and I'm going, oh my God, get me out of here, like walking through this maze, no windows, right?
Yeah. I had a job like that.
Did you have a job like that?
Yeah.
It's a sad
It was like
job.
a prison.
Yeah, it's like you would rather be outside in the cold doing
Yeah.
something than in this cube land of controlled heating. Yeah, it does something to your brain, I think, at some point. All right. And those of you with those jobs, they probably should. But anyway, so since we're talking infant through preschool, I just want to kind of make sure we're all on the same page with just my language in here. I'm the infant I'm talking kind of right on birth to 1 year age. Obviously from 1 to 2, there are big infants and small toddlers kind of thing. Toddlers about 2 to 3, and then preschool around 4 to 5. Preschool is usually 3 to 5. I like to have even units, so but these are sort of the continuum in there. What you're going to be doing in STEM is actually at this age, the most work that you can do here is developing habits in yourself of being able to look at the world with a STEM eye, look at the world like a scientist, think like a mathematician, inquire and create like an engineer or a technology person. So as you start to develop, when your kid doesn't know anything, you're changing their diapers, you're working them, and then you can start to have these conversations with them that they may or may not understand, but you get in the habit of doing it. So at these ages, it's more about you. In this age, now you start encouraging. As you start to observe yourself developing it, you start to encourage the types of habits and dispositions that would be helpful for them as they start to develop it together. And then, of course, by the time you get to your wonderful teachers, they'll be able to help them build some of those skills. Okay, so let's look at science. So someone said curiosity over here. That's like a big thing for scientists. Not that engineers or mathematicians aren't curious, but at this age, you can think of science as being curious. And if you've got the young kids, they probably already have a lot of that. Is that right? You're seeing curiosity in your children now? Okay. So you just want to provide experiences in this early childhood age to encourage that curiosity. You don't have to have the answers. In fact, what I've found is that parents or teachers who provide those answers short-circuit those children to not developing curiosity. Because every time they go, I wonder, there's an answer. And they're like, oh. So either they become a child that thinks science is about answers, that it's like Jeopardy, or they have their curiosity turned off. They're not interested. And then especially if they find out that the answer you gave them was wrong, then they get their world gets all, it's like a teenager and the world crumbles at 3. Okay, so don't do that to your children. Just keep that curiosity and that sense of wonder open. Now, one of the things that people do is they bring them into the natural world. So some people had said nature, that's great, your instincts are good. Nature, parks, zoos, walking through the neighborhood, your children probably will pick up things, rocks, leaves, little bugs, plants, whatever. My son loves hunting for tomatoes in people's garden. He's like, oh, do they know? Okay, so And I'm like, not your tomato, okay, leave that one alone. And then of course there's a squirrel takes it, and you get cheating anyway. So anyway, but natural world. This little girl's playing with bubbles. Another big thing is providing them the experience to interact with natural things. Bubbles, balloons, and water are huge things for children. And if you think about it, they've been doing a lot of experimentation in dropping things at a very young age. And what they do is they do that everywhere. They do it every day. They do it with different things. You're saying yes. They do it at grandma's house. They do it at the restaurant. They're like, because what they're trying to figure out is, does this work every time? That's what they're really doing. And then when you do bubbles, oh my God, they're going up. They're not going down. So their world has changed over again. And they may not know how to make sense of it, but at this point, it's not about making sense. It's about seeing those things, experiencing those things, and knowing that those things happen. You know, because in this world, their world's magical right now. And we just introduce them to all the magic that there is. Okay? The other thing people neglect is the design world. Letting children fool around with devices is safe. Obviously, you have to have some parental safety things in there. But this is a top of a laundry hamper, for example, that you press the button and it pops up, and when you push it down, and it closes, and you hear a click, and it pops up again. One child I heard about figured out at a very young age the little heater that you can press the button once, it turns on, press it again, it changes, and then press it to another point, and it will turn off again. And then the mother said, and then I'm walking up the stairs going, do I hear a heater on? And then I hear a click, 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 click. And then you walk in and there's a heater on. And he was only about like 2. And so part of it is they start to figure how things work. They don't know why, but they know, oh, this one, if I click it a couple of times, it'll go through a cycle of that. That's a huge thing. To recognize cycles is one of the biggest things.
My grandson, I have a new washing machine that's computerized, and you press the button, and every time we go to do the laundry, it's like, oh my God, he must have been here because it'd be all messed up.
Yeah, you start to learn like you have to check everything.
Yeah.
Especially as they get to certain heights that they can reach it on their own. But you know, part of it is if you can create an environment that allows that and have a discussion with them as they go along. Or let them do it. Say, press this button, now press this button, then it'll develop those aspects. Not only that there's an order to things, but then you should no touch. You know, I let you touch these, but these are not touching. And then they're usually okay with that. Early childhood folks setting boundaries, right? It's an important part. What you're doing here, by giving this sense of experiencing wonder, is you're helping the elementary teacher, kindergarten through 4th, 6th grade, and all your elementary school is set up too. You're giving them some good foundations to start putting those lessons that they have to create standards with. So I don't know how many times I tell you that some teachers will go, oh, so when you were at the pond and we saw this, and then the kid has never been to the pond and they never were taken to the pond for a field trip, and then half the kids that have seen the pond go, oh, just like this, and then they make all these analogies, and the kids that never had it sit there and go to this, and say, me, I've never seen this, I don't know what's going on, I don't know. Stupid, I'm not going to say anything, I'm not this kind of person. And that's the path they're going to go down. So teachers want to, if you refer to anything, make sure they've had that experience or recreate that experience in the small, so that all the children have experienced it. And parents, the more experiences you can give them, just in case your teacher may not have realized it. You know, sometimes you have a bad teacher. These things you can help sort of make that possible. And then have a conversation about, you know, having your child feel comfortable saying, they talked about this and I don't know what that is. Okay, let's go out and do that. And then go to the teacher and say, hey, you assume this, you can't assume that. So, you know, I'm letting you know. But again, that's why they do field trips. That's why they do, this is like trials to fountains or swim pools and so forth. You're dealing with both the natural world and the design world and creating this sense of. Now, what the teachers want to do is to give them more observation skills. That's one of the big things in science, is the ability to observe, to notice, to see this is happening in this environment, under these conditions, and start to notice that. In winter, the same pond looks different than in spring or summer. So it's the same thing. You cannot take your children to the park enough times. Now we move into mathematics, that a lot of people have some anxieties about. But if you think about the observation, especially at this early childhood age and this elementary age, mathematics is really the language to describe that observation. One of the big things that people don't realize regarding mathematics at this age is we're talking about spatial understanding, where you are in the world. And when your child is learning to walk, and they're learning to stick that spoon in their mouth, they're doing all these spatial calculations. You're figuring out how fast something's going, how much they have to lift it up, they have to figure out how to get it from this point to this point. That's hard. You see a little tiny baby, they're lucky they can grab something. Now to try to maneuver that into their mouth, that's a huge thing. Because they're thinking of all these different things of distance, how fast you're going, how rate you're going, and so forth. So a lot of physical activity is really important in developing mathematical skill. Because you're learning about distance, learning about speeds. It's what we call transformation orientation, that you can take something and you can turn it and flip it and rotate it and rotate it this way and rotate it this way. These are huge. And actually they say spatial skills, not math tests, spatial tests, not math tests, are the best predictor for success in STEM. And one of the best ways that you do this is actually in our class and physical education class. Large motor, small motor skills. Handwriting. They're trying to eliminate handwriting in some places. They're saying to say not only reading skills, but in this type of development and brain development, it's essentially important. So it's one of the things I just leave you with. But if you think about engineers, if you think about technology, if you think even about scientists, you have to be able to rotate things, spin them around. Look at a sheet of paper and imagine what that's like. Reading a map, that you can figure out where you are, orient yourself, and I can walk this way, walk that way. And if you need to turn that map for the beginning to learn it, then you do that. But you start to develop those skills. So spatial skills is one of the biggest ones in early childhood for math development. There's a lot of studies that I've had out on my website that indicate an increase of just simply using spatial words, about 45 spatial words, will increase performance on spatial tests and spatial abilities. So when you're talking with your children about puzzles, saying, well, what if you turned it? What if you turned it the other way? And then gesturing is one of the big things too. So I can say, when you feel over this, I can say, put it on top of your head. 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 And then the kid gets it. Because you're linking this concrete experience, visual concrete experience, to a word that's kind of an abstract concept. Over here I have books. All of these ones have books. Oddly enough, the Bernstein Bears are really good at guiding you through languages that are spatial. Inside, outside, upside down. You have that one?
Yeah.
Kids love this one. Going in. So they're giving some visual pictures. You can talk about it. You can say, oh, see, we know he's in there because of the eyes. So you help the observation skills too. But it's also giving them some vocabulary. Upside down. I even actually turn the book upside down so they something saw what's happening. Going out, outside, over there. These are things that are very spatial. Very important to developing math. Because if you can know that things stand for things, then numbers make sense. Because you're counting things. It's not just the things that you recite. It actually has a physical meaning to it. So kids are usually good at math, have an image in their mind of what's represented. It's not just a series of calculations or whatever. They know what it means. Bears in the night is the next level of spatial, and they start doing more complicated things, which actually I have a friend in English, and they teach English as a second language. They said prepositions are one of the hardest things for children learning the English language to understand. So this actually helps. So out of bed, to the window, at the window, out the window, out the window, down the tree, and then you have a sense that you're going down. So there's visual to kind of abstract concepts of placing yourself in space. And they're trying to find this owl You would have, under the bridge, down the tree, over the wall, around the, all these things, and then you just, with you gesturing, that also helps put some concrete understanding on what's happening. And then that builds the sense of numbers. And the bears on wheels is that next one. One bear, one wheel. And you can go through. One bear on one wheel. So you get a bit of that spatial with now numbers that you're observing. Two bears on one wheel. And then we start to anticipate, there are no bears coming. And so you can start to see that there's no things coming. Okay? So language is extremely important too. Just simply in a sense of speaking to them, using it, you don't have to drill it in. You don't have to say, now let's count to 10. You just sort of keep giving numbers have a meaning in there. And then it becomes easier to do operations. Because it makes sense. I take this, I take this. They can always go back to something and make sense of it. And that's actually what we find by the time kids get to middle school. We're supposed to start doing things like algebra-like things. And then the kids who don't get that those mean something get frustrated and quit. So the best teachers realize they have to bring it back to a concrete understanding of this means. Money changing is a big way that they do that concrete. All right. My image had S and M. I know that sounds not so great, but S and M is the pillars, because that's what we do in school usually. And then the T and the E have come in later, but they've sort of been enhanced. So some schools are able to kind of put that in a bit more. Some schools aren't quite sure what to do with it, so now we'll talk a little bit about that. Are these helping? I know this is just some background. We're getting into some tips later, but I want to give you some sense of perspective so we have a shared understanding. At this level, early childhood, technology is about building skills. And it's building skills with tools. A spoon is a tool. A fork is a tool. A stick is a tool. In fact, there was this time when my son kept taking straws and pulled it out of the cups, and then he'd go in and out of the cup, and then he'd pull it out and stick something else, and then my husband said, he's in that monkey using stick to get ants mode. When you think about it, that's a tool, right? And think about all the spatial things you develop it. Where to put that, how to orient your hand, how deep to go in, and you're observing. The ants will crawl up on my stick. I hope there's not ants, but there's a go in the mouth. But anyway, it's a very primal experience set. So if you can allow some situation where, shoes isn't going all over the place, but you can allow them to stick that straw in and out of the container, that's a huge thing. Okay. Tools, and then material experience. I have some blocks here. So some of you have rubber blocks, and some of you have foam blocks. Obviously, if your child is in the sticking stuff in your mouth phase, foam block, not a good idea, because they'll tear it right apart and eat it. But the rubber blocks, really meant for that. And if you think about it, they'll feel it, right? They'll squeeze it, right? Although with something. They'll maybe smell it, but then they'll always sort of eat it, right? But they're using all their senses. It's another observation skill. So if you can get them things that are safe for them to experience in all the different ways, they're learning material properties so that later when they go to create something, they go, I want something that feels like this or has this sort of stiffness to it versus something like this versus something like this, paper, cardboard, or whatever. So they're really experiencing all the materials and they're learning how to get that bang for it. I'm going to bring up, I used to teach at St. Kate's, which is a women's college, and we did an engineering class and they'd actually make things. And what I found was some of them had a lot of experience in making things, so they could go to making things out of wood, didn't bother them. They'd pull out their saws and their tools and so forth, start hammering away. Some students had no experience with that, and so they had to have someone lead, so they would have to use things like cardboard and so forth. So we taught some engineering concepts that utilize both ends of those skill sets, but if you see your child has more experience with different materials, they have a larger set of things they can pull from to create. So that's one of the good things in early childhood. So especially in that preschool age, all the different types of materials. So here you're exposing them. But then as you get to that preschool age, you teach them different types of technology. These are cutting technology tools. There are other ways of cutting technology. Sometimes you can tear it. Sometimes you can cut it. Sometimes you use a my son goes to a Montessori school. They use Exemptor knives. Some preschools don't do that, but some other ones do. But they learn different cutting technologies, new forming technologies. Folding, origami is a great folding technology. You learn some materials you can do that with, some materials you can't do that with. It also helps with the math. You have now words. Fold it over, flip it over, rotate it, fold it this way. And then you get that spatial. Fastening technology. I always love fastening technology because tape is one of your early fastening technologies, and glue. And staples. Have you ever watched Curious George? Those are the three things he uses to fasten up things. But staples are like rivets and nails, right? Tape is like different types of adhesives. and then glue, you can get all the way up to like welding and soldering. So it's sort of similar types of fields. You're just starting in an age appropriate and going upwards. Okay? So elementary school teachers will thank you for your children, or maybe not thank you because they'll start to ask for, well, why don't you have this and why don't you have this? Or maybe they will. But like, for example, craft sticks gives them that wood experience, toothpicks gives them that wood experience, and there's different materials that you can use. Now the last thing is engineering. Engineering, to a large extent, there is argument about whether engineering can even be taught in K through 12. There's a couple of factions that say, no, you can't do engineering until you have calculus, till you have physics calculus, till you have all these things. Yet every engineer that I know who's practicing says, I learned how to do a lot of this stuff when I was a kid. So there's two aspects in there. Engineering as a engineering applied science discipline, yes, you have to wait till you have all of the other things. But engineering as a habit, I think you can develop now. So that's what I always tell people about like early childhood. You're developing skills for creating solutions. So if you can get your child to be persistent and get the habit of trying and trying again, and that can be through physical activity, crafts, or observation, or whatever, or getting them to repeat for perfection. They did it once, and now they're going to do it again, because they're going to do it better this time, and they're going to do it again. You're not drilling them. They achieve that themselves, kind of thing. But you can tell sports do the same things, right? So those habits are in there. So if you can create a persistent child, your elementary school teacher will thank you for that. Because then you have a kid that doesn't give up easily and will try to keep moving forward with success. And know what success looks like in chunks. Okay? And then this one for those who are elementary now, has many elementary. What we'd like to move them into is to logical problem solving. Because often what happens is someone does something, the kid does something, that didn't work. So they try and try again, they throw everything out and do something completely different. Whereas in elementary school, they try to say, well, let's observe what worked and what didn't. And let's make a small change instead of throwing everything that we have out and starting from scratch again. I mean, sometimes you have to do that in the creative process, but use a little logic, use a little resource things and so forth. So that's what they're trying to do with doing engineering. Oh, I have the eggs. Why do I have eggs? Egg drop is a very popular activity that kindergartners all the way up can do. The idea is that you figure out how to package your egg so you can drop it from a 2-3 story height and it won't break. Very basic, very understandable. They've done studies where the kindergartners come up with the best solution compared to even college-educated engineers. Because they think simple. They're like, let's try it, let's do it, let's try it again, let's do it, let's try it. The engineers are trying to calculate everything and do this and that, and the kids are just like, let's just keep going. And so they actually have shown that they're much better than the engineers are. And then learning from similar designs of sort of saying, well, where have I seen this before and how did they solve this problem? And can I use some of that in my solution? Daniel Tiger, I don't know much Daniel Tiger. Yes, Daniel Tiger. Some people love him, some people hate him. But Daniel Tiger, my husband goes, why is he wearing no pants? Anyway, but apparently it's a guy. But anyway, Daniel Tiger and Old Owl were trying to build a tower really tall. And they were building exactly as they normally do. They stack blocks on top of each other. And they get to a certain height and they would always fall down. Okay? And they got really frustrated. And then the teacher came up and said, well, what are you trying to do? And we're going to talk about it and the frustration first. And she said, well, Have you seen other towers that have been built taller, like as tall as you want them to be? And over the bookworm goes, oh yeah, I've seen. And he pulls out a picture, and she goes, well, how did they build that one? Because it was a tower that was built like this. Right? It was built with a more broad base kind of thing. She said, well, what is that in the picture? Can you do that over here? And they go, oh, see how there's more blocks down here? And then I put fewer blocks up top, and then maybe I can build higher. And then they try that out, and it works. And so it's this idea that you can kind of see something else and grab some ideas from that design. And these are big concepts. My teachers, these are big concepts for them to be able to do that. But as you can help guide them and help them start thinking this way, I can tell you every engineer goes and finds out what's already been made and tries to figure out how can I make it better and how can I not reinvent the wheel. And that's a big thing to do. So if you can develop that in your third grader, and you think about where you've set them now for life. Now, last 20 minutes, let's talk about things that you can do. I'm hoping, and I'm giving you a lot of information, so I'm hoping I made my conversation. So 3 things you can do to help out STEM development. You're probably already doing it, but now you have a little bit more knowledge behind what you're doing. Playing. Either playing with them or also allowing them to do the play. That's sort of that, developing those habits and dispositions. Because through play, they touch, they manipulate, they toss, they build those spatial skills, they observe, they become more persistent, and so forth. So, playing is a big one. And I'm like thinking you're going to go through like, Yvonne, I already knew all of this, right? But hopefully you know a little bit more. Talking with them, as I said, helping them go from seeing things to talking about them, giving them the words to describe it a little bit more. That's the math. But it also helps the science, it helps them communicate more. It helps your teachers evaluate where they are, because we're a very word-based society. If you can't use words, people, even though you have great thoughts, there's some special teachers that can actually see that you have that, but other ones, you have to speak it, you have to write it, you have to do those things. So helping them with that. Gesturing is big. And then analogies. So like, for example, my son is big. Like we were driving down through the north country, and we turned a corner, and my husband was like, oh my God, there's a deer here, right? Because you're driving, and you have to like watch out for a deer. And my son goes, dog! And we're like, yes, that does look like a dog. So analogy is like, because it has a head, or body, and 4 legs. However, we call it a deer, because it's bigger, and he goes, dog, deer, and so like, they can kind of hold 2 things that seem different. But you just want to kind of keep saying, acknowledge that they actually have seen the analogy, because biology classification is seeing what looks similar to each other. That's totally a biology thing, that's a science thing. So seeing that, but then allowing the room for the correct vocabulary and the more advanced knowledge. So we always say, yes, that is like this. But we call it this on the car. Like the tail of a plane, he's into planes too. Planes has a tail. Does a cat have a tail? Oh yeah, do you have a tail? No. And it's sort of like, so these things have tails. And they kind of don't look like each other, or they kind of do look like each other. And so you have this sense of, you don't have to define it, they don't have to have the textbook answer. But you provide that scope. And then allowing them to do investigation. And this is probably not for your 3-month-old or for the 3-month-old. You're not, or your 9-month-old. Well, they start to do some investigations already. But allowing them to do some dropping, that's an investigation. Some testing things out, poking things is a great investigation habit. And then this little child got himself a digital camera and is taking pictures and so it moves from destructive tendencies to creative tendencies.